Good day, everyone. My name is Vince Gelman. Thank you for joining me today. We are currently experiencing a next level of our global collapse. We can see now that the banking system is collapsing, and it is purposely being dismantled. This is part of the dark agenda to consolidate accounts, consolidate assets into larger banks. So the smaller banks are no longer operable, and people have to move their business to larger banks. And so there's a consolidation into more and more centralized banking systems, into larger banking systems. And so this is a strategy to bring more power to the top, so it's much easier to usher in the central bank digital currency. So just like how we can look at a parallel with our media outlets. Years ago, we had so many more small media outlets, and over time, those small media outlets got gobbled up by larger and larger media conglomerates. And so now we just have a small number of corporations who own all the media worldwide. And so this has all been part of the larger totalitarian plan that's been in the works for a long time, and that is to centralize power. And of course, the central bank digital currency is a big part of their game plan. And so by moving all accounts, moving all assets into a smaller few, or a larger few, because in terms of size, banks, it's easier for the dark forces to enforce this central bank digital currency. Once again, I invite you not to be afraid. I am not afraid at all. Know that the collapsing system is necessary, and yes, there is dark orchestrations behind it, but it is necessary. And I want to give you some hope and some higher perspective, some metaphoric perspective, and that is, if we look to the caterpillar transformation into the butterfly, it shows us the way. It shows us the way of what's happening right now. And the thing that's wonderful about the caterpillar is that it willingly goes into the chrysalis. It willingly goes, just like Jesus willingly went to the cross. That was his chrysalis. That's where he was transformed. His cross was his chrysalis. The chrysalis is the cross of the caterpillar. So the caterpillar consumes and consumes, munches and munches up to 27,000 times its body mass before entering the chrysalis. It really fattens up because it's building up the energy reserves to go through such an arduous metamorphosis. What a heroic journey that is for the beautiful little caterpillar. And it's showing us how to end. It's showing us how to give ourselves heroically to the end times, which in truth is an inner and an outer ending for us. It's an outer system. It's an outer collapse of the system. But this is a system that humanity has for a long time been in a very deep codependent relationship with. It's a very pained codependent relationship that humanity has been with the world. The world is different than Mother Earth. For me, the world is what humanity has created: political systems, education systems, social systems, economic systems. Humanity has been in a very consumptive relationship with these systems, right? Like the consuming caterpillar. So we call ourselves consumers, and we say that we live in a consumer society. So that's why the caterpillar is a wonderful metaphor for the consumer in humanity. And for many humans, for so many humans, I think they identify themselves more as consumers than they do human beings in the way that they act. They certainly identify or live more as human doings than human beings in the way they move, in the way they perceive and live and interact, in the busyness that they are. So this is a very dysfunctional system. And just as we have been feeding off of these broken systems, feeding off of these tortured animal products in industrial farming, feeding off of violent footage from entertainment, feeding our children violent video games, feeding off of really skewed propaganda news, the 6 o'clock news. Just as we've been feeding off of that destructive, pained information, those systems, the dark forces who ultimately run these systems are feeding off of our pain. They want to keep us in fear. They want to keep us in a low vibration. They want to keep us consuming. And that is their parasitic way, because they're so low on life force. Their hearts are so clouded that they need to feed off of us to survive. They're like vampires. It's a very vampiric energy. So as they feed off of us, we feed off of what they have to give us. And so it's a really insidious, codependent relationship. And this entire system, this human world system, must collapse now. It must dissolve in the chrysalis. And so when we see these banks collapsing, this Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank of New York, and now we see Credit Suisse beginning to dissolve, these are all signals of the greater system that is entering its metamorphosis, this human global infrastructure that is one system. So if you can imagine that entire system, humanity in the world, this codependent toxic system, as one fattened up caterpillar, well, it's now dissolving. And so this is why we can turn to the wonderful caterpillar and butterfly as our spirit allies, our spirit teachers. They're showing us this very ancient rite of passage. It's a very ancient rite of passage that initiates have gone through, going back in time in mystery schools, on mountaintops, in the wilderness. So the chrysalis is our mystery school. The chrysalis is our temple, like the temple culture of Egypt or Greece. That's where the initiations took place. So the chrysalis is our cross. The chrysalis is our as our temple. In ancient Egypt, as a final stage, the initiates would enter the Great Pyramid and they would go into a sarcophagus, and that's where they would have their great encounter with death. And so the sarcophagus is a tomb, but it's also a womb. It's a tomb womb. It's where the initiate is reborn anew. And so the chrysalis is a tomb womb. It's where the caterpillar dies, but it's also where it's born anew as a butterfly. And so the world collapsing right now is our great initiation into death and rebirth. The entire system is dying so that we can, as a collective, be born anew. An initiate, a true initiate, they're called twice born. That's a way to describe a successful initiate, is that they're twice born. In the distorted Christian view, they call it being born anew, but they don't really understand the deeper dynamics of what that means and the amount of sacrifice that is necessary. Sacrifice is a wonderful word because sacrifice is related to the word sacred. So we are sacrificing for the sacred. And so Jesus demonstrated sacrificial love. He demonstrated the art of sacrifice on the cross. He sacrificed himself for the collective. And the caterpillar demonstrates a beautiful, heroic act of sacrifice. It says, I'm going to sacrifice for the sacred butterfly. I'm going to sacrifice for the sacred. And I created a video a short while ago. It was called, What Are You Willing to Sacrifice for Truth? What are you willing to sacrifice for truth? Humanity doesn't want to make sacrifices. They want convenience. They want movies and sports and sitcoms and trips to the pub. They want predictability. They want routines. They want certainty. They want to hang on. They don't want to let go. They want to know. They don't want to enter the unknown. They want to keep it together, but they don't want to fall apart. They want to stay strong, but they don't want to be vulnerable and messy. But you see, falling apart, letting go, going into the unknown, getting messy, that's what happens in the chrysalis. That's what happens in the dissolution process. And what's interesting is that, and I've said this before, is that if we look at the word dissolution, the word solution is in there. So the solution is in the dissolution. So what do we need now? We need butterfly consciousness on the planet. We're done with the consumptive caterpillar consciousness. So the solution that we're looking for is not to fix the caterpillar, but the solution is in the dissolution of the caterpillar and the birthing of the butterfly. We are done with caterpillar consciousness on this planet. We are finished with that. We are ready to birth ourselves anew in butterfly consciousness. We are ready to fly. We are ready to spread our angel wings and fly, and to experience ourselves as pollinators in higher acts of service and higher acts of co-creation. We are done with identifying ourselves as a very land-based, like a caterpillar, very earth of the, and I don't mean grounded in the earth, I mean the caterpillar being bound to the earth symbolizes being bound to materialism, whereas the butterfly symbolizes our higher self. And it also lands on earth as well. So the butterfly is both in the air as a higher self experience, but it is also on the ground as well. It is rooted on the earth simultaneously. So we are complete with identifying ourselves as material, as form, and we are ready to experience and remember our higher self in embodied form. And that is another way of understanding this wonderful metaphor of caterpillar to butterfly. So that's what we are ready for. And like I said, it's not about fixing, making better, saving the caterpillar. The caterpillar has now become toxic. It's too much. It's destructive. There's significant consequences in our consumptive patterns on Mother Earth, on Gaia. And again, this is a very toxic codependent system with dark forces. We're done with this. It must collapse. And it must dissolve, right? So solution is in dissolution. The solution is in the dissolution, right? Quite literally in the words. The wordplay shows us the way. So the solution is birthing our butterfly consciousness. And so the most compassionate thing right now is this collapse. And so paradoxically, on the one hand, the dark forces are orchestrating the collapsing of the banking system. This has long been in play. This has been part of the plan for a long time. So on the one hand, they are orchestrating it, and we do need to name it. It's important to name it. I'm really grateful for all the alternative media who are speaking out loud and speaking truth to power. And on the other hand, there is a higher divine order in this. There's a higher divine plan that we must recognize. And what I invite you to see, and again, I've said this before, is that in the actual metamorphosis of caterpillar to butterfly, when the caterpillar weaves itself a chrysalis, what begins to emerge inside that chrysalis is what's called imaginal cells. So imaginal cells represent the seeds of consciousness of the butterfly. So the seeds of consciousness, these little imaginal cell lights, you could say, start to pop up all over within the body of the chrysalis woven caterpillar. But the immune system of the caterpillar does not recognize these imaginal cells, these revolutionaries, these starseed light workers, these masters. And so it attacks and destroys them, right? It censors them. It deplatforms them, right? So because they're bringing in the higher way, they're bringing in the light into the dark, and the dark doesn't want that, right? The dark doesn't want that. It needs to censor it. So the only way these imaginal cells can survive such an onslaught is by forming clusters, by forming little spiritual communities where two or more gather. And in that, they build circles, you could say, of resilience, groups of resilience. And then those clusters join with other clusters. And they're all operating and communicating at an entirely different frequency of consciousness. They're self-organizing, and they're coming together, and they're building a network of butterfly consciousness by grouping together. And then eventually there's a tipping point in consciousness, and that's it. And then the rebirth occurs. So we're moving towards that tipping point. There will be a tipping point. And so I encourage you to see this larger metamorphosis as leading us to a tipping point. This collapse is leading us to a tipping point, because just like within the chrysalis, there is both a simultaneous dissolution or collapsing of the system. It's happening in our world, right? So just like in the chrysalis, it's happening in our world. There's a simultaneous collapsing or dissolution, but there's also an emergence of more and more light. So we have lots of starseed workers on this planet. We have an unusually high number of master souls. We have more and more people waking up. So as it is in the world that is collapsing, it is in the chrysalis. Just as there are imaginal cells popping up within the chrysalis, there are imaginal cells popping up in the world. And there's a good chance you're one of them, an awakening person, someone who's a light work, a starseed, a master soul, who's here to be a revolutionary, and who's here to birth butterfly angelic consciousness. So what I want to say to you is that we are empowered to the degree that we recognize ourselves as an imaginal cell. We are disempowered to the degree that we identify with the old collapsing system. The people who are going to be most afraid, most confused, most disempowered are the ones who are identified with the old systems, the old collapsing caterpillar consciousness system. It's the ones that say, hey, they're destroying our democracy. Hey, we need to keep normal. We need to save normal. We need to fix normal. Well, democracy, as we're now realizing, is an illusion. We haven't been living in a truly democratic society. So just look at where all our tax dollars go. We can see that now. Look at the war machine. So we are empowered to the degree that we recognize and act as, to the degree we recognize ourselves as an imaginal cell and contribute as an imaginal cell. And in recognizing this, in owning our imaginal cell butterfly consciousness within, in owning it, what happens is that we are aligned with the larger divine plan. We see ourselves as part of that divine plan. We consciously acknowledge, recognize in our cells, in our body, in our bones, in our heart, we acknowledge that we are part of that divine plan. And when we align with that divine plan, we are aligned with its currents. And when we are aligned with the currents of this divine plan as an awakening starseed imaginal cell light worker, when we are aligned with those currents, we are aligned with the currency of life, meaning we are aligned with the abundant flow of life, and therefore we do not need to worry about the central bank digital currency. We do not need to worry about the collapsing banking system, because we are in the right place at the right time, because we are aligned with the higher butterfly plan. So this is very important that you understand this. This is why it's very important to do our work, our healing work, and to heal all remaining parts of ourselves that are identified with the old caterpillar regime. And again, there's nothing wrong with the beautiful caterpillar, but I am working symbolically with this. So we must do the work to heal the old shadow imprints, the consumptive imprints, the fear imprints, the lack imprints, the shame imprints that have kept us in a codependent relationship with this toxic world, and to awaken, to activate the imaginal cells, our light codes, right? Our light codes are symbolic of these imaginal cells, and activating these light codes of our spiritual DNA and awakening our butterfly consciousness, our beautiful higher self consciousness, and opening, spreading our wings and flying. I'd like to also say that one of the great teachings of all winged creatures is that there is no flight. There is no flight without spreading our wings, and there is no spreading our wings without exposing our heart, right? That's one of the great teachings, is that to fly, we must open our heart. We must expose our vulnerable heart. So one of the things that must be healed is all the protective mechanisms in our heart, because it is my humble opinion that the deepest wound is to the human heart. We have many good reasons to have a wounded, protected heart. So this is a great time of revelation. It's a great time of transformation. It's a great time of courage. And I invite you all to draw inspiration from the beautiful caterpillar, butterfly. They are our sacred spirit animal teachers. They are teaching at this time. They bring the message and medicine that we need at this time. Trust their rite of passage. Trust what they show us. Trust that they show the end times that are necessary, the end times. They show that there must be an inner end times. And yes, we are experiencing an outer end times, but that is not separate from the inner end times that is taking place and must take place for there to be a radical transformation in consciousness, and for us to, as a collective, birth a new butterfly world. So everyone, thank you for listening and watching. This weekend, actually on the 19th, Sunday at noon Pacific, I am leading a Butterfly Soul healing and activation, online healing and activation ceremony where you commune with this spirit animal, and it supports you to heal. And it supports you to activate the codes that are synonymous with the spirit of the butterfly that you hold within yourself, and to activate the divine qualities that butterfly represents. That's at noon Pacific on Sunday the 19th. It's 75 minutes, it's 77 Canadian. The day before, on the 18th, Saturday, 3 p.m. Pacific, I'm working with the Archangelic Ruby Ray. It's called Ruby Ray Roots, and that ray, in its red ruby color, has a specialty, and that is your root Muladhara chakra temple, your grounding temple. And as the storm winds blow, we need to be grounded in our body, we need to be grounded in Mother Earth, so that we do not get swept away, so that we can be a sturdy, steady beacon of light for others through the growing darkness. So Ruby Ray Roots online healing and activation ceremony, 75 minutes, 77 Canadian, this Sunday the 18th, 3 p.m. Pacific. Butterfly Soul online healing and activation ceremony, noon Pacific, and that's Sunday the 19th. Otherwise, my friends, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I will see you when I see you. Bye.